somewhere in there. So here somewhere. Which is up.
Okay, so good afternoon everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking around upgrading Cognos and three key things that you should know. But before we do that, for those of you that don't know, it might just be worth us giving you a very quick 2-minute overview of Triangle. So my name is Andy Shepherd. I'm the sales manager for Triangle. I've been in IT for a number of years. A lot of those have been with IBM, but last year I joined forces with Chris to help grow Triangle and also get a bit more insight into analytics. In terms of Triangle themselves, we are a 1.5 million turnover organisation. We are growing steadily, 25% year on year. And predominantly our customer base is in the UK, but we do have some relationships in the US as well. We've got a team of developers based here in the UK and support staff as well, and we're soon to become gold certified from a Cognos perspective as well. So we certainly see ourselves as one of the leaders in this space. But that's enough about us as a business. At this point, I'm going to turn over to Chris Lewis, our owner and director, who will take you through the meat of the presentation. But just a quick few things. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you can always come back to it at a later stage or share it with your peers or colleagues. If you've got any questions as you go through the material, just pop them up on the chat box, and if we don't answer them as we go through, then we'll circle back and get them answered at the end. So at that point, over to Chris.
Thanks, Andy, and welcome everybody today to our first of a series of webinars on interesting topics. So just putting forward the agenda here of what we're going to look at today. And we mentioned that there's 3 questions. I've actually added an extra question, which is how much will it cost? So just going through the agenda, just a quick an explanation and an understanding of what support and subscription is. Quite often it's misunderstood from a client perspective as to what they are actually getting when we mention support and subscription. And then a quick look at Cognos licensing, another black art. It's quite a complex area, and another area where clients quite often say that they have issues around understanding what they're actually getting, what they're licensed for, etc. And then the question really is, why should we upgrade? What version am I on? And I'm sure we'll look at sort of a number of starting points, both Cognos 7, Cognos 8 and Cognos 10, and take you through some of the reasons why you should maybe think about upgrading. And then finally, we sort of look at what the cost might be associated with that. And then we'll go through just a few example customers that we've upgraded in the last 12 months. And then at the end, if anybody got any questions, we'll go through that. So moving into what is support and subscription. Well, basically, there's 3 areas that we need to look at. You can have your licenses directly supported by IBM. This is where you've got a PA agreement as Passport Advantage agreement with IBM, and the support is directly with IBM. So your licenses are licensed to IBM or to you from IBM, and when you have an issue, you get on the telephone and you call IBM direct. What's probably more likely to happen in the smaller customer or the small to medium-sized customer is that they are having direct support. So that's where they have support through a support providing partner, such as Triangle. And this is where the license is actually comes through our Passport Advantage, or the partner's Passport Advantage agreement with IBM, and we produce a sub-license to the end customer. So the end customer actually owns the license, but we take first level support So this helps IBM reduce the number of support staff they need, because we basically sanitize any of the support calls that come through. And we like to think that we can probably sort out 90% of all support calls without a direct intervention or escalation to IBM. Of course, we've always got that option to escalate to IBM should we need to, and we have our own KPIs from IBM to make sure that that we do the amount of work that is required before we escalate it through to IBM for support. So subscription, we talked about IBM support and we've talked about direct and indirect, but what's the subscription part of it? Well, actually that's a fee that's passed to IBM for product development. That's what pays for their fixed packs for the new releases and entitles you as a customer to have these passed on to you. We as a support providing partner provide this information to our customers and pass it on via our FTP website, so that you're always up to date with the latest fixes and understand what's coming on the new releases. So if we look at what we've got there, so the support element is around software product issues, and this is where you've done your research, you've done the check on Google, you've checked the manual, and you've got an issue. There's an error message, or you cannot configure something, and that's when you would pick up the telephone or put an internet request into us in order to get the issue resolved. Basically, we also it also entitles you to software product advice. So this is where you may have a misunderstanding, or you don't understand the documentation that you're provided with, and you would like some assistance. We take the attitude as a software providing business partner to help you wherever possible. So the software support and product support is not a replacement for consultancy services. We sometimes find that clients will go along the line of, well, we'll just pick the phone up to Triangle and talking to other partners. This happens again and again. But as partners, we will often try to help them on non-product issues where we can. Obviously, if it gets to a point where there's a lot of issues that come up which are non-product, then we will gently advise our clients maybe a day's consultancy services or some additional training might be required. So if you've got an up-to-date support and subscription, then that entitles you to new releases, entitles you to any fixed packs. And on occasions, it also entitles you to hot fixes. This is where maybe a release has come out and a particular company's got a particular issue that maybe is not something that has occurred across an awful lot of the customers that have got the release, but is maybe specific to that organization. And IBM will quite often look at that and produce a hot fix, which basically gets you an interim fix between fix packs. IBM's very good at that, and Cognos, prior to IBM's acquisition of Cognos, also were very good at doing going the extra mile for the clients to make sure that they get the best possible experience on their software. So that was really talking about support and subscription. So what about Cognos licensing? We've talked about direct and indirect. And I talked about how the licenses were supported through a PA agreement or an enterprise licensing agreement with IBM. So that's the direct mode. We've also talked about how indirect licensing, that's when you purchase the support via a partner, and it's sub-licensed to the customer through the partner's own PA agreement and licensing agreement with IBM. What would normally happen with this is that you're if you're on indirect, you will get a sub-licensing agreement. We typically produce one, which is really a shadow and refers back to the IBM's licensing agreement, and maybe with a few local partner-specific clauses in there. But we tend to make that as light touch as possible. Obviously, we have to cover ourselves from an IBM licensing perspective, but as I say, we try to keep it as light touch as possible. So those tend to be the most popular type of licenses you get. You're either supported directly by IBM, the licenses are licensed by IBM, or it's through a support providing partner. I'm just going to touch on quickly on two other licenses types that you may hear. One is the service provider. This is quite often a case when a license is required where you, the end customer, are actually providing a service for your customers and using Cognos as the software for that service. If the end customer is not owned at least 50% by yourself, i.e. it's within your group, then you have to have a service provider license or an XSP license. We can, with arrangement, hold those XSP licenses and provide a service for you on behalf of your customers, and that's something that we have looked to do with a number of our customers. The application specific license is where you have a license, maybe you have an HR system that you're providing service to your end customer, in which case you have an application specific license. One of the limitations here is that you do have to be an IBM business partner in order to provide an application specific license or run an application specific license. Again, we've looked at this with a number of our customers who are service providers, where we can actually create a service which is a combination of our services and the client's services, and produce an ASL license where we take some of the hard work out of actually maintaining and monitoring the licenses. So, why should I upgrade? Well, let's start with that you're sitting in Cognos 8 at the moment. So you've got Cognos 8, you've got a current support and subscription, and you really should be upgrading to 10.2.1, which is the latest version. There are fixed packs available to that version as well. So if you're on an up-to-date SNS contract, then you're entitled to upgrade. If you're still on version 8, then you're effectively unsupported. 8.41, which was the latest version 8 release, went out of support on the 30th of September 2013. So you really should be looking at moving on. And there's a number of reasons why you should be looking at 10 anyway. So if you're directly supported by IBM, then if you get an issue and you report it to their help desk, their default response will be, please upgrade to a later supported release. I'm sure they'll help you. We certainly will try to help any of the customers that are on that position to try to get them on to a future or a more up-to-date supported release. However, IBM, if it's a fault with the software, they're more than likely to say, even if we escalate the issue to IBM as a fault within 8.41, they're more likely to say it's fixed in a later release, so you've got to upgrade it. And you don't really want to be in that situation of having to upgrade in a hurry. So there have been many enhancements since Cognos launched 8.41. And if you're on SNS and you haven't upgraded, well, you're missing out. So, as I say, mobile is now included free of charge. One of the big areas that is becoming quite popular with with our customers now is deploying analytics and BI reporting to their end users via a mobile application, be it iPad or a mobile tablet or telephone. In version 8, that was a chargeable extra, which put people off. It was something like about £20,000 for the mobile server. That's now included in version 10. Version migrations from 8.41 to 10.21 are relatively painless. If you are one of those customers, and there are a few still out there that are on an earlier version, certainly 8.3 or before, then we would advise some more serious checking when you're migrating reports. Some of the features in 8.3, although supported and worked in 8.3, didn't any longer work in 8.4 and above. Not because that they removed support, but more that the later releases actually fixed bad practice, and some of the reports were written with bad practice in 8.3 and actually functioned. So you do get a certain element of those reports that you've written in 8.3 that may not work. So we would just recommend, if you're on a release prior to 8.4.1, then we need to take a little bit more care and attention to making sure that we go through all the reports that are being migrated. So that was Cognos 8. So here you are, just sitting on Cognos 10. So you're on a release that's not the latest release. Well, why should I upgrade that? Well, upgrading from an older supported version of Cognos 10, the justification really is around, are there any of the new features that you find attractive? The pressure's not really on, you're in a supported release. However, there will be new features that have come up, like dynamic cubes, the latest Rave graphics, active reports, various performance improvements with the new releases. And if you're not currently on out of support, then what you need to understand is when will that release be out of support. The releases are coming out thick and fast from IBM. They're bringing out lots and lots of new features. We need to keep up to date with them. And as I said, moving forward from a Cognos 10 release, early Cognos 10 release to 2.1 isn't a monumental issue. If you were coming up from a later release, so it's worth keeping up to date and getting the new releases there, certainly before the current release that you're on goes out of support. So I've just put this slide in. There are still a number of people that are sitting on Series 7. Series 7 software was very, very popular. We've recently upgraded a client from 7.1, would you believe, to 7.5. So there's two real valid routes here. You can go from 7.4 or prior releases. You've got a valid support and subscription contract, and you can upgrade to the latest supported version of Series 7, which is version 7.5. That's a valid route, and one that would still keep you on support. Or you could go take any of the Series 7 releases and upgrade to Cognos 10. So if you were upgrading to Cognos 10, well, PowerPlay cubes are relatively easy to migrate. You can access them, PowerPlay cube, as a data source within Cognos 10. PowerPlay reports probably need rewriting to get the maximum benefit out of Cognos 10. There's a lot of new features there. Those that have got a lot of impromptu catalogs can be migrated using the migration tool and build a framework model, but they tend to be fairly basic, and we tend to recommend that you use that as a base for actually writing a new framework model. And the framework model in Cognos 10 is the key hub of how Cognos 10 works, and it's important to get that right and use best practices. So impromptu reports, being that they're effectively client-server reports, and we're moving to Cognos 10, which is a web browser based. There isn't a straight like-for-like translation. So we normally end up with customers that we move to Cognos 10 by rewriting those reports. It quite often gives Series 7 customers a good opportunity to review the reports. We've had several examples where the customers say we've got several hundred, nay thousands of reports, but actually when you melt it down, you find out that the users have taken a report, made a slight change to it, saved a version, taken that changed report, created another version, and you end up with many versions of the same report. So you can normally distill it down to a few reports that can go forward within Cognos 10, and Cognos 10 is much easier to create reports which are multifunctional with prompts and the functionality within Cognos 10 to make it one report be good for many types of report that you would have normally written separate impromptu reports for. So the way we would do that is we would look to write those either in Business Workspace, Advanced, or Report Studio, or in some cases we use Query Studio. I've got on the slide there that IBM's roadmap suggests that Workspace is the preferred tool to use. Certainly we're seeing now from 10.21 for new customers that Query Studio, Analysis Studio is no longer there as a studio to use. The IBM is pushing you down the single workspace functionality of Business Workspace. We have recently upgraded one of our clients who from Series 7 to 8.41, and we've got another project now to move them from 8.41 to 10. But they'd already started the migration before we got involved, and basically had started writing in Query Studio. And some of the reports have had to be written in Report Studio, and we've been in recently to help them with that migration effort. If you've got some ReportNet reports in Series 7, those can also be migrated over to Cognos 10. Again, similar to the comment around early versions of Cognos 8, we would say that each of those reports would need to be fairly closely reviewed and may need a level of rewriting in order to make them work in the later versions of Cognos and get the best out of them. So PowerPlay Web. Well, PowerPlay Web is replicated as PowerPlay Studio in Cognos 10. This was something that happened, I think it was in Cognos 8.2, where there was an awful lot of kickback by the user community when PowerPlay Web was replaced by Analysis Studio. Cognos at the time didn't really want to put PowerPlay Web, but the pressure of the user community made them put PowerPlay Web in there. We still have customers using that today in Cognos 10. However, it's not IBM's recommended route, and certainly we would have to put up, as a partner, we would have had to put up a very good case to get a migration customer to actually use PowerPlay Web instead of the current Cognos 10 features. Excuse me. So, the extra question, free of charge on this one, how much will it cost? Well, if you're a supported customer, then the upgrade from Cognos 8 to Cognos 10 is free of charge. And I put in there from a like-to-like software perspective. When IBM bought out Cognos 10, and anyone that's worked with Cognos 8 will have been there looking at the different licensing roles, would understand that there are many licensing roles within the software. Those licensing roles in Cognos 8 are replicated with Cognos 10, and if you move from one to the other, then the cost is free of charge. So there is no cost associated with upgrading like for like. Having said that, some of the new features will need an enhanced license of some kind in order to release those new features to your user community. The most popular, the most likely one that would happen is when you had a consumer license in Cognos 10, in enhanced consumer in Cognos, sorry, if you had consumer license in Cognos 8 and you move to Cognos 10, then you need an enhanced consumer to get some of the additional functionality around workspace. But we can advise you on that when we see the license types you've got. It needs to understand what your users actually require. So quite often we find that by taking the opportunity to do the upgrade and reviewing your licenses and understanding what the end user actually wants in the way of functionality, we can consolidate your licenses and upgrade them, quite often providing an overall saving. I won't say always, but quite often we have found that there are licenses that are just not being used, so that the license can be ended as far as support is concerned, with the saving on the annual support and subscription. We always recommend a migration plan is prepared before we do any upgrades. And most upgrades, even in fairly complex environments, can be achieved in less than a week. And some smaller installations in one day. We're talking about a single server install where we can go in and actually do the upgrade and move you up to the latest release all in one day. What we would typically do is to provide you with the environment where you have the old version and the new version running in parallel. So you're not rushed, or we don't burn the bridges when we do the upgrade. You can actually look at your previous version, have that still running, and migrate your content to the new version and make sure it runs correctly before you actually switch off the old version. So normally our consultants are able to get a good idea of timescales based on a short initial investigative meeting with our clients, no more than sort of 2-3 hours. We get an understanding of what your environment is, what reports you've got, how many you've got, and are there any complexities. And from that we can normally put forward a good idea of how long it's going to take in the way of timescales and obviously cost. Migrations from Series 7 to Cognos 10 are more involved. We recently did a large migration for Thomas Cook, where we moved Series 7 over 120 PowerPlay cubes up to Cognos 10, and looked at how we could use some of the new Cognos 10 features in order to get the best out of their migration exercise. As I said earlier, small installations may actually be better off staying with Series 7. There are an awful lot of customers out there that have got 1 or 2 licenses of PowerPlay, 1 or 2 licenses of Impromptu, and it's hard to justify moving up to Cognos 10 unless, of course, it's part and parcel of an overall improvement in BI delivery to your business, and where Cognos 10 can be justified, and the additional expense justified to do that. Cognos 7.5 is still a supported release, and the inside information I get will probably be supported for best part of 2 to 3 years to come. Will there be any developments on it? Probably not. It will be just fixes for new databases, or if there are any bugs left in it, it's a pretty bug-free release. As I said, larger installations may benefit to move into Cognos 10, and we'd be delighted to have a chat with anyone that's doing that to talk you through the advantages of migrating. So finally, I just want to go through a few of our customer success stories really around migration. I touched on the Thomas Cook story just now. Don't really need to tell people that it's a large travel companies. They initially were on Series 7, moved up to Cognos 10.11, and will be moving up to 10.2, mainly to get the advantages around the dynamic cubes. They had 120 power play cubes built daily, quite often starting from early hours of the morning and probably not finishing until midday, which meant that the reports based on those cubes weren't really ready for the business until middle of the working day. Many of the reports that were built were used, they were extracting data from cubes and stitching them together using Excel for comparative reporting. We've gone a long way to actually rectifying a lot of that stitching together and produce the reports directly out of Cognos 10. As you can imagine, they're a large multiple server, multiple data center installation across two data centers, one in the UK and one in Germany. And a quote from Peter Lumley, the Business Intelligence Manager at Thomas Cook, there at the bottom. This was another we talked about with the conversion of Cognos, some of the Series 7 reports, impromptu reports, up to 8.41. We installed 8.41 some 2 years ago in a multi-server deployment. We've recently gone in there. It's taken them that long to actually start to move stuff from impromptu. There was originally 65 reports to migrate over. I think it ended up closer to 75 reports that were written in the end using a mixture of Query Studio and Report Studio. We're planning to help them upgrade from 8.41 to 10.21 sometime this quarter. That's an ongoing exercise that needs to be talked about. And one of the value adds there is that we do support Trade Team on a 24/7 support contract, which is something that we can offer our customers. And finally, this was Hanover Housing, a large housing association. They are currently on 8.41. They're a single server deployment. We upgraded them to 8.21. And in the upgrade process, although it was 3 days, we actually 2 of those days were taken around a proof of concept where they wanted us to provide some reporting in some of the later technologies available in Cognos 10 in order to promote this the new software out into their business. So that was quite successful. Again, got a very nice quote from the customer who was very pleased that we exceeded her expectations and went the extra mile. Okay, so that's roughly. Well, we've just got to the end of that now, and the next one is the next slide is actually questions, and I've got a few. Looks like we've got a few questions. Okay, just a minute. I'm just asking. All right, I'll hand over to Andy now, who wants to add something at the end here.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So there are really 3 main things that we hope you take away from today. And really, key point 1 was really around the upgrade path from Cognos 7 to Cognos 10. It is very clear, albeit with some additional development work may be needed. The key point 2 was really around from a supportability point of view. From Cognos 8, from September of last year, you're no longer supported. So that's something to really think about. To think about the upgrade plan, I mean, the good news is that from a licensing perspective, for the most part, it's free. And key point 3, if you are on Cognos 10 already, you are entitled to upgrade. There's no additional cost from that perspective. You get bags and more functionality as well. So that was it in terms of the points that we wanted to make from today. We'll open up for questions to see if there's anything coming through from the audience. No, okay. So I think that's good for today. So listen, thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to attend today. As I say, we'll be posting this up on our website, and hopefully you've got some value from our time today on the webinar. So at that point, we'll draw it to a close. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you.